Welcome to The Third Chair, a show about real people, real stories, real life. And here are your hosts for The Third Chair, Peter Grigg and Doug Bazeski.
Doug, do you know who's on the show tonight?
Yes, John Shepard.
John Shepard, that's great. You know,
Because I happened to see him in the green room.
the green room, yes.
I thought I made a wrong turn to the bathroom.
Was he wearing his kilt?
He was debating.
Yeah.
He was holding a kilt and a pair of trousers.
Well, very good. Well, we're excited about having John tonight. He's a big believer in teaching kids entrepreneurial skills and promoting positive community. Please welcome John Shepard.
Yes.
Welcome to another episode of the third chair. Third chair with our special guest, John Shepard. John, thank you for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on down. And John has worn many hats over the years, including the one he's wearing now, and we're going to find all about that. And if you are watching tonight and you are saying to yourself, I have seen this man before, somewhere, some newspaper, it's true, and I'm not talking about the mugshot section. And so we will disclose that later on. In the meantime, welcome, John, and we're going to start it off with Doug asking you a few questions.
Thanks, Doug.
Hi. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
You told me a story about you were working on a rescue mission in Oregon, and that story really hit me. Could you tell that story to the audience here?
Sure. There's a little backstory to that. I didn't just land at a rescue mission out of nowhere, and so there was a little bit of...
You just showed up one day, right?
Well, in a way, yes, and in a way, no. God never just, he does strange things that are inexplicable, but there's usually a path. And there was one for me. I ended up volunteering, like a lot of people do, just going to the rescue mission one day, and it was after a period of kind of real, traumatic. It was right after 9/11. The backstory there had to do with the business it was my business I had founded and had been running for several years, and it was in the tech sector, and 9/11 killed that sector literally overnight.
Wow.
And so a bit of a personal awakening. God kind of used that as a 2x4 upside the head to say, okay, you've been doing this. It's time for you and I to have a conversation about what I want you to be doing. And again, so it was in that time a time in my life. It would have been typical of call it a midlife crisis, but this was really a midlife spiritual intervention that God took on my behalf to say, you've been doing your own thing, but I've got some other ideas, and so we need to sit down and talk. And what he did was took away my business, in a very dramatic fashion, caused me to have to rethink basically everything.
Yeah, what am I going to do with my life?
Including spiritually, and again, I grew up in the church, literally. They call missionary kids MKs and preacher's kid PKs. Well, I have all the Ks.
You had all the Ks.
I was a preacher's kid that my preacher dad eventually became a missionary, so I have both of those experiences. I was in the church my whole life. Thought I understood how it worked. But in the course of my re-education, God had a classroom he wanted me basically to go and observe in and participate in, and that happened to be at Union Gospel Mission in Portland, Oregon, where I was at the time. And again, I didn't really know why I was going there. It was just something I felt I needed to re-engage my Christian faith in some way that I had never done before. And so I figured, well, here's something I've never done. I've never, as a preacher's kid, I didn't drink. I didn't know anybody who did. And like, okay, let's go do, it's just like, this is way out of character, something that was unusual. So I'll go do that. And so I did what everybody does. I went down to work the soup kitchen, volunteer to serve meals to the homeless, right? That's a cool thing to do.
Totally approved.
Right. Okay, that's what we'll do.
Gold standard.
And I go show up for my my night to serve, and the volunteer director starts having the conversation. Who are you? What do you do? And the word computer came out of my mouth because that was my business I had just been in. And she stopped me and she says, "Well, what do you teach?" And I said, well, yeah, it's been a big part of what I've been doing. I'm teaching clients computer stuff for years. And she says, well, we just lost our computer teacher for our recovery program here at the mission, and we need somebody to teach Windows and Office and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And so that night
For the young people, that was before you were born into it. Yeah, you
right.
had to learn it.
Right. And so,
So
we had
cool.
classes to teach people computer skills. And that night was the very first time and the very last time I ever worked in the kitchen at the rescue mission. 2 weeks later, I was teaching computer classes to 35 recovering addicts in a recovery program. And I'm like,
Wow,
how did that
that's
happen?
neat. Yeah.
And it was the beginning of my entry into the learning process that God wanted to take me through. Because what happened in that process, I observed things that I had never seen before in my life, quite literally. The main one was, first of all, I had to get an attitude adjustment because I realized, I thought what was going to happen is they're gonna think I'm weird. They're gonna see right through me because I don't belong here. Our lifestyles are so they'll I won't fit in. That was my mistake in thinking. What I've discovered was everybody in the program, and this was a co-ed program, men and women together were in my classes. They were real people. They were just normal people. We would have, I would go down and have dinner with them at the mission before class at night, and we'd talk about Blazer basketball and other stuff. And it was like, this is the same conversations I have with, and I'm like, duh, you dummy. Of course they're real people. And I actually, it was my prejudices that were the problem, not theirs.
Did you go with a sense of like I'm better than they are?
I was just I thought I was different. I came from a different world. I didn't
different,
think
but not necessarily better.
Yeah, I didn't think I would understand.
You were the K guy.
Right. I mean, what's a preacher's kid belonging at a rescue mission? That's I was raised where you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't.
Jesus would never go to a rescue mission.
Right. That's that backwards thinking thing. And so
Right.
in the process, I got sucked into the community that was happening at the mission. This was a residential program, so everybody lived there, slept there, ate their meals together, worked during the day, went to classes at night. That's the part I participated in. I was just a volunteer teaching the class, but I began to see what was happening here. And I would have conversations at dinner with a resident, just like sitting across the table like we are, and they would start to tell me, once they got comfortable with me, they would start to tell me their stories. And the stories I was hearing were, to me, unbelievable. These are movie of the week kind of stories.
Wow.
The backgrounds these people had come from were like, that actually happened to you? You didn't just make that up? These people were raised in horrifying scenarios, and the damage that they had survived to get to where they were here at the mission. And what was really shocking to me was hearing that part of the story, but I'm hearing it from a perfectly sane person who's in their right mind, who's now sober and has Jesus in their life, and they're talking to me clear-headed. And I know them because I'm spending time with them. I know that they're not that same person. How did this transformation happen from how broken they were to what I'm witnessing? How did that happen?
So you had learned your whole life as a missionary kid and a preacher's kid. Hey, God really can change people.
That's what I was told.
Now you're told, and now you are seeing like profound transformation in front of your eyes.
Right. I was literally watching it happen in front of me, and it dawned on me. Here I am, 40 years old, been in the church my whole life. I'm more or less accidentally here at this rescue mission, and I'm seeing something I'd never seen before. That disturbed me. It's like, why have I never seen this before? I've read about it, but I've never seen it. Isn't this what's supposed to happen in church? It never happened in the churches I went to and grew up in. Why did I have to come down to a rescue mission to see this? And then immediately the next question was, why? What's going on here that's not going on where I live? And I got to figure this out.
And that's a great thought to hold as we go to a break. We're going to ask you that question, why, when we're right back.
The official coffee of the Kentucky-Arizona Walnut Association?
It's kava.
The national coffee of Kawasaki, Japan?
It's kava.
Hiya!
Is it the secret elixir of the surfers in Hawaii?
Or is it the secret island recipe of Kona, Koala, Kauai, or Cola?
It's kava. Kava is Polish for coffee. And here at Kava Coffee, we focus on serving a delicious, high-quality cup of coffee in a space where love, coffee, and people mix into the perfect blend.
We value our relationships with our customers and our roasters. Buy locally whenever possible and truly have the homemade touch. Our pastries, syrups, and even our almond milk made in-house.
So come on in, relax, get some work done. Enjoy the Kava community, some encouraging words from the Kava Coffee Gang.
Kava Coffee.
Be awake.
Welcome back to the third chair. Oh, I almost forgot that time. What is the name of this program? Chair. And John was talking about people who had been hurt, criminals and addicts, and how they were coming to God, and he was seeing this and he was wondering why. And
Yeah, I mean, it was, to me, it was a profound question because, like I said, I had never seen anything like this before, and I should have.
And you traveled the world.
Well, I have been, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Missionary kid, preacher's kid, like I said, I've been in the church, and what was I seeing? And why was I seeing it here? And so that launched me kind of into, again, my analytical brain was like, okay, this is a puzzle. I've got to figure this out. What is this thing that I'm seeing? And it took a while. Be down there. Eventually got to the point I was down there 3-4 nights a week teaching classes and doing stuff on the weekends with the residents in the program, to the point where after a while the director just said, hey, you're here all the time, you should just work here. So it actually worked into a staff position there. But in the process of that, what I discovered was there is something unique at that environment, in the rescue mission scenario of faith-based substance abuse recovery, as we've designed it in North America over the last 40 plus years. It's been designed into a certain kind of thing that is very unique. It doesn't exist anywhere else in our culture. This is a place where you put people, random people who don't know each other, and essentially lock them in a building and leave them there for an extended period of time with the goal of get well. Mm-hmm. And in the case of faith-based recovery, like a rescue mission, we add Jesus to that. It's get well spiritually. Mm-hmm. Introduce you to the healing of Jesus in the process. When you do that, something unique happens. People become bonded to each other in an environment like that, in a community like that doesn't happen in the normal, everyday normal. I'm not so sure how normal it is, the way we live in North American Western culture. Live together, work together, sleep together, worship together, play together.
Hold each other accountable.
You have to. And again, these were people also in a situation that survival was paramount. They were there because this was the last stop on the tracks for them. If they didn't make it at UGM's program, there was nothing left for them after this. It was a most intensive residential type of recovery program. These are people who've blown out of every 90-day program there is, every 6-month program there is, multiple times before they end up at this program where you live there for 2 or 3 years. And so this was really intense. Survival was on everybody's mind, and nobody had any point. There was no point to pretending at this point. Everybody knew why you were there. Okay, so let's just...
You have a spot here, you're screwed up.
Right, and everybody knows it, and everybody knows what it is. So there was no pretense, and that's a huge thing, because out in the normal world, where I had been spending the previous 40 years, it was all about pretense. It's all about pretending that I'm okay, and when I go to church on Sunday, I have to convince you that I'm okay. That wasn't going on at the mission. Nobody was trying to pretend anything here. And so when you create that artificial environment physically, and then you add Jesus to the mix, the Holy Spirit, who these folks are coming to know Christ in this environment, what I discovered is the magic ingredient to the transformation wasn't just the proximity. That was a necessary element, but it was the fact that relationships and trust was being built in this kind of hothouse environment, such that residents could speak to one another and interact with one another in a way that I didn't even have the freedom to interact with people at my own church. I was watching one resident at dinner talk to another resident, and I would just kind of be sitting there, and I knew this guy, and the things he was saying to this guy, he's not smart enough. Wait a second, where did he get that from? And I was watching, and this guy here was listening, and it was meaningful to him. It was like, wait a second, he's really speaking something important to this guy, and this guy's listening. And I'm like, oh, it dawned on me that it wasn't this guy and his intelligence that was the active ingredient in that interchange. It was the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit wanted to say something to this person, and he had a vehicle to use to do it. He could use the mouth of the person that he indwelt over here. And because the trust was built in the relationship there, the message got through. And I saw that happening more and more, and I saw it happening with me. They would say things to me. And I'm like, oh, where did you get
on point things, on
right,
target
well,
things?
Things in my own life, and things that I needed transformation on that I didn't even know about. And it wasn't threatening, it was truth. And they were claiming that I was doing the same thing for them. And I was like, wait a second, I'm not trying to do that. How is this happening? What I discovered in the process is if you read your New Testament and the language of the New Testament about the Holy Spirit, it's always corporate language. The Holy Spirit indwells the body as a corporate entity. Yes, we've been taught as evangelicals that the Holy Spirit indwells me personally, and that we usually leave it at that. We're missing the point. The Holy Spirit indwells all of us corporately and is active in the body. What I was witnessing, what I finally discovered at the rescue mission, was this artificial hothouse environment of people who were in such close physical proximity and relationship to one another that the Holy Spirit was free to do his thing.
He was in all of them.
He was talking all day long in between them because they had open lines of communication that he could use. And what I was missing in my life, out in the normal world of churches, I didn't know anybody that well. Nope, I didn't have a friend who knew me well enough, like these guys at the mission knew each other, to sit down and tell me what I needed to hear, and do it in a trustworthy and biblical way. And I didn't know anybody else that way either. The first time I'd ever experienced that, well, at least since high school, was here at the rescue mission.
Wow.
That's when it dawned on me. That's what's different. By trying to get people sober, we accidentally did a whole bunch of other things that we really didn't know we didn't intend to. We created real, intentional Christian community that was transformative. And it wasn't the genius of the counselors that the mission had hired to help people get sober. They were
along for the ride.
They were nice people and they were helpful, but they were just part of the process.
Story, yeah.
It was really the interaction between the residents and to some extent the staff and volunteers that were engaged in that process at that level that made the transformation happen. So that's my long-winded answer to, what happened, what did I see at a rescue mission? And it led to other parts of the story that you may or may not want to hear about, but I moved on from that mission experience to work on the question of what happens to people who've experienced that and then have to leave it.
Can you reproduce it?
Well,
can you
and that's
reproduce it on command, so to speak?
Right,
or
and that's
on demand.
That's a big problem. It's a silent problem in the whole world of both secular and faith-based recovery.
Because some of these guys
relapse.
Some of these people had to leave the program.
They all have to leave eventually. They can't live there forever.
And then
what happens?
Made some observations on that too.
Right. And it's a unpopular kind of secret in the world that recidivism rates post-graduation of these programs are very, very high. They're in excess of 80 to 90% in a lot of cases. And Union Gospel Missions program was not much of an exception. Theirs wasn't as high as the worst ones, but it was a lot higher than we wanted it to be.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, why? Another why question. And so that was the next thing. Basically the executive director kind of brought me on to try and help him unpack that question. Are we doing something wrong? Could we be doing something different? Why do so many people do well while they're in here, and then they're back at our front door 3 or 4 or 6 months after they graduate?
And we're going to have to hold that thought on why that happens. that is wondered by recovery communities everywhere. Why? And I think Johan Hari had part of the answer when he talked about connection. And we'll be right back. We'll get back to our guest in just a moment. But
Do you have a story to tell?
would you, yes you, like to be a guest on the third chair?
Send us an email and tell us about yourself and your story.
And please follow us on social media.
Now back to the episode. Welcome back to the third chair with our special guest, John Shepard. And he was given the task of figuring out why so many people came back when the program, they seemed so well when they were there.
Right.
And what did you find out, John?
Well, yeah, that was another, and again, a puzzle, and I like puzzles. And
Puzzles.
Things to solve, problems.
Not an easy puzzle.
No, it wasn't, and it took a lot of years. By the time I was really digging into that one, I had volunteered there for probably 7-8 years and been on staff for 2 or so. What I discovered, and I did discover something that I believe is really at the core of that issue. I just went out and I talked to as many graduates of the program as I could find. And I just had them tell me their stories. And it became apparent rather quickly that the stories all fell into 2 basic storylines. If you were somebody who graduated and you never came back, your story was basically the same. The details are different, but the story was basically the same as everybody else's who never came back. If you're one who graduated and then relapsed, your story was different than their story, but the same as everybody else's who relapsed. So the storylines went like this. For everybody who left the mission and graduated and didn't relapse, never came back again, their stories started and had all the same basic elements in it. It basically meant that when they walked out the front door of the mission on graduation day, almost without exception, in every one of those cases, there was almost literally someone standing on the sidewalk out there waiting for them. And it was a specific kind of person. It wasn't somebody from their old life. It was somebody that they had met while in recovery. It was either a volunteer at the mission who they struck up a friendship with, or maybe even a staff member or a friend of a staff member. Somehow they had made a connection, and this person had taken they had a relationship. And they cared, this outside person cared about what was going to happen to them. And they did more than just care, because what they would do is they would then basically adopt them into their network of life. Again, you come out of recovery, you've lived in this building for 2 or 3 years, you don't know anybody on the outside, you don't have any friends, you don't have any job, you don't have any place to live, you got to do all of that. What this connecting person did was provide all of that for them vicariously. They used their resources. If they owned a business, they would hire them. If they didn't, they'd go to their buddy who owned a business and say, hey, you got to hire Joe here, he's a good guy, and get him a job. They would take him to church. They would start introducing them to their friends, and eventually the resident who's coming out would get their own network of relationships established because this person leveraged theirs for them. And it created the community and the stability that they needed, an income, a place to live, a safe place. Flip that to all of the ones who relapsed. Their stories all went like this. When they graduated and walked out the front door of the mission, there was nobody standing on the sidewalk waiting for them. They just walked out and they look up the street and down the street. Had nowhere to go, didn't know what to do. No one was there for them. They gravitated to the only people that they knew. If they were around, they were from their old life.
That's not.
They couldn't get a job because they probably had a felony on their record from way back when. So they ended up not being able to afford a good place to live. So they would end up in the wrong part of town, in the wrong place. All of which produces stress. And stress is the number 1 trigger for relapse in addiction. And so they would end up basically not being able to cope with the stresses and the realities on their own because they didn't have any help. And so that was the revelatory moment, the aha. It was, okay, the ones that get help, the right kind of help, that works. The ones who don't, this is what happens. So that's the solution. And what I was seeing was the help was it looked completely arbitrary and accidental. There was nothing pre-programmed about it. The mission wasn't setting up people to come and meet the people when they graduated. There was nothing intentional about it. It was just, if it happened, it happened. And that's what bothered me. It's because, wait a second, if that's the key, then why don't we just do it intentionally? Let's set it, let's make sure this happens. Why do we just leave it to chance?
Yeah, boy, you were way ahead of the thinking. I mean, in the recovery community now, we're realizing that too much of the emphasis is put on detox and acute care, where really your bread and butter long-term gains are on all this stuff that occurs after the fact.
Right. It's about about healthy living.
Yeah, wellness and healthy living.
You can't do that in isolation. Again, isolation and stress are the top triggers, for relapse and for addiction in general. And so here we are. We're doing the two worst things, that we could do, and so that kind of, again, it was a revelation. I started a nonprofit after I left the mission with the intention of trying to do exactly what I had identified, and focused primarily on the income piece, because that was the hardest one for re-entry. People coming into re-entry was how to get an income started, how to get a job if nobody would hire me.
Yeah, let's focus on that because that is critical and beyond very important. Because I've worked with some re-entry programs too, and they sort of have a little catchphrase. When you come out of prison, for instance, any job, better job, and then create your own company, because that's really, for a living wage, that's the answer in the long run.
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, and depending on where you are geographically in the U.S. or in North America, you will have greater or lesser success at that kind of a scheme, because I'm talking about a time that's probably 10, 12 years ago now in Portland, Oregon. At that time, Portland, Oregon was not a very felony-friendly town. There weren't a lot of places that would hire a felon.
A little bit better now?
A little bit better now. Other geography, other places and cities in the country are better than others. So you can have a bit of better luck in that. We didn't have much of an option there. And so my take on that, having been a small business owner, knew several small business owners, it was a world I had been in prior to experience with the mission, was these are the people that make jobs.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that have the employment, and they know how to get people employed. So they're the ones that can help solve this problem. If there's an employment problem, let's go to the small business owners and let's go to the entrepreneurs. And so what we did was, rather than say, go through the mind-numbing, demoralizing process of being rejected day after day when you were applying for jobs.
Yes.
Which again, that's murder.
Yeah.
On a recovering addict. It's humiliating. It's depressing. Skip that whole process. We'll do an end run around the system that doesn't want you, and it's still perfectly legal to go out and hire yourself in America.
Right.
Right on.
And you don't need somebody else's permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is some basic knowledge and some skills. And most, especially the men, a number of the women that I knew in recovery, they did have marketable skills. They had worked in jobs before their addiction blew up their life. Many of them had good skills. They were in construction, they were mechanical, they just never worked for themselves. And
they were up against prejudice and discrimination.
Right, well, and
so not based on, I can understand not hiring someone if they truly can't do the job, but just because of a mistake, choosing not to is...
And that's a whole societal issue there.
Yeah,
our criminal justice system is so massively broken weighted so extreme on the punitive side.
Yeah.
Even though we call it corrections, we're not correcting anything. We're
There's
just
very
breaking
little
things.
rehabilitation.
Yeah. So that's a bigger issue. But so in the case of, practical realities on solving the real issues facing somebody coming out of recovery, you got to get that income generated. And so what we did was we just took the approach that we would do, I called it, entrepreneurship 101, business
I like it.
101. It was
I
just
like
the simple things: how to get a license, how to get a business card, how to network, go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings, learn how to shake somebody's hand, wear a tie, be professional, start a business. And that was the solution for a lot of folks in that situation. The odds were certainly no worse than your odds of trying to get traditional employment out of a system that wouldn't give it to you.
Absolutely. We're going to hold you on that thought, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Peter Grigg on the set of The Third Chair. Our company, 2 Men and a Duck Entertainment, are excited about supporting Quantum Leap Recovery, an audio podcast that talks about all issues about drug and alcohol recovery. So watch for it and listen to it, and it'll be a great time of learning, and hopefully it'll help people that are struggling with these issues have a healthier life. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to The Third Chair, and we have our very special guest star, John Shepard.
Thank you.
So what are you doing these days, John?
Well, it's a little bit of a switch. My wife and I moved from Oregon here to Colorado Springs about 7.5 years ago now, for mostly family reasons. Her kids and a good subset of our grandkids are here rather than in the
Follow
Northwest.
the grandkids.
Yeah, so we had a chance to come here, kind of a short window. It was like go now or forever. You probably wouldn't get a chance. So we took that opportunity and came. And I've done a couple of different nonprofit things here in town, but one of them was early on. I met a gentleman. Again, it was like, I'm new to town. It's like, okay, what goes on in Colorado Springs? I had only rumors. Like, everybody who lives here thinks they know what Portland's like from the news. Everybody in Portland thinks they knew what Colorado Springs was like. That's another episode we can talk about. Sure. But I was like, okay, what's going on in Colorado Springs? So I started to look around, got on some websites, and ended up meeting a gentleman who was in the process of trying to found a charter school here in town, something I'd never done before. But what caught my attention was his concept was to teach entrepreneurship to high school kids. And I'm going, I know entrepreneurship. I've never taught kids. I've been on the other end of that, where what I had just come off of in Oregon was trying to teach adults, entrepreneurship, who, if they had learned it 20 years before they met me, I might not have had to have been involved in their life at the point that I was. So I thought, hey, this is a good idea. This guy's got This guy's got a cool idea. I wonder if I can help him out. And he was looking to put a board together, and I'm like, I've never done charter school, but I know entrepreneurship and I know how to start stuff, because I'd been doing it for 30 years at that point. And so he and I kind of hit it off, and I got on the board, and then 2 years later, we actually launched the high school, and I was the first employee, was director of operations, did the whole thing, went from clean slate, nothing, to got a building, put staff in it, launched the program. I was not on the academic side. I'm not a teacher per se in the public school world. So I was the ops guy. I did all the machinery part of schools. Mm-hmm. And that was a fun experience. It reinforced for me the part that I'm best at, which is starting stuff and rebuilding broken stuff. That's a lot of what I've done in my career. And so that process kind of ran its course. It got up and running, and I was like, okay, there's nothing more for me to do here. And lo and behold, just a little while ago, another opportunity for a different kind of charter school experience came about. This time with a school that's been around for a long time here in the Springs, but is really being reborn. A brand new management team, brand new board, whole new vision, kind of retool the whole operation. And through a couple of acquaintances and friends, they're like, yeah, you should meet John. John, you should meet these guys. You guys need each other to make this work. And so
Cool.
I'm the director of operations for this new charter school. Or
Wow.
not new one, new to me.
Is it? Is there a theme to this charter school? Or
We're working on that right now. They're basically just it's a K through 6. So again, I was in high school before, so this is elementary school. Basically focuses on right now. They're just focused on small class size. They meet in person, unlike a lot of other schools right now that are all online. So there's some emphasis on that. Teacher creativity is really important for this school. As a charter, you get to color outside the lines a bit, and that's kind of what this school is really focused on, and the parents really like that.
That's the draw of charter schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they go with a different curriculum. I mean, they cover the regular thing.
Right. You use your standard curriculum, but you have waivers on a lot of things. And so again, that's the whole theory behind charters is let's be innovative in education. I think they could do a lot more. That's another episode we can talk about.
Yeah.
But charters, I believe in charters are absolutely essential to the health of the education system, and our education system as a whole is not getting any healthier. That's for certain at this point. So charters are super important that we have quality ones. And again, that's why I'm pro charter. I'm pro innovation, and I like, again, fixing things that are broken or starting new things that solve problems. And
Nice.
this is the area that God's put me in. He says, go work here, and I'm like, okay, I can do that.
All right.
So
Going back to your school that you taught entrepreneurship. You would think there'd be more of that in the regular schools, but they really don't.
yeah,
They're still
again,
called regular schools.
right.
But you don't really get that much of that.
There's a reason for that, and it's probably another episode long explanation. It's been the focus of our education system. Secondary has been tied at the hip to post-secondary education in the U.S. for 50, 60 years or more, in the sense that now, the expectation we've created is that you go to high school, graduate high school, and go to college.
Right.
College is what's going to prepare you for life. And you don't need, that we've learned that now,
Yeah.
but we've been teaching that
Yeah.
as a cultural norm for so many
And that
generations.
still is the primary message.
Right.
Despite
Yeah.
the fact that
Right.
people are graduating with useless degrees.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so this is why I gravitated towards this founder, and he and I hit it off because he's on the right, he's definitely got the right idea. You need to get to these kids sooner and give them a real life look at career options. What you really can do and what you need, what skills you actually have to have,
Right.
as opposed to this piece of paper from a college.
Right.
Certain of those kinds of things they're necessary. If you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to go to college. But is everybody going to be a doctor and a lawyer?
No.
No.
So
And what's wrong with being a plumber or having your own business?
Exactly. So trade schools and entrepreneurship, we have neglected it as a culture for generations, and we're paying a huge price for it
Yeah.
economically and socially. People that are underemployed and not where they belong and not fulfilled in what they're doing and don't understand how to get there.
And there'll always be clogged toilets on a Sunday requiring an emergency plumber.
Yeah, there will.
Especially at my house.
Yeah. And those guys charge a pretty penny.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, they're doing it right.
Yeah. So, you're right. And again, that's why I believe in not just entrepreneurship. Again, I've seen entrepreneurship up close as a vehicle of transformation. It's powerful.
It's powerful.
Right.
And it's something that's we don't utilize it in that way. We think of it as purely a money thing. I want to be Bill Gates. Well, again, there's only one of him.
Right.
But again, small business and entrepreneurship is what built this country.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's keeping it alive.
Yeah.
And if we kill that, we're done as a society.
I think sometimes in the public education system, there's a little bit too much emphasis that socialism is good and capitalism is bad, and I think that's out of whack. I think.
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, I just, the idea of working for yourself to make a living, to be able to take care of your family, there's nothing wrong with that idea.
No.
And ideally make a little extra so that you can give back to the community.
Sure.
Yeah.
Again, that's how this country was built.
We've seemed to miss that message a little bit.
And yes. And so again, that's why I believe in charters as a corrective piece.
Mm-hmm.
The person who thought up that idea, they should get a Nobel Prize. I mean, that was a genius idea. We need that. We need school choice. We need private schools. We need trade schools. We need entrepreneurship training from junior high on up.
Yeah.
And so that's what's been motivating me for the last few years, and that's been, God's used even the time I spent off on my own, doing my own thing. He's redeemed that because I learned a lot of lessons in how business works and how life works, that I'm able to use both at the rescue mission experience where I was still learning, and then now in these projects, that I can do things that I wouldn't have been capable of doing,
Sure.
So that's fun to see, and it's gratifying to me, and I'm grateful to God that He's redeemed even the stupid stuff I did.
Well, us all.
Yeah.
And you're all fired up about that. When we come back, we're going to talk about being fired up at Holy Smokes.
Amen.
We'll be right back. We sure hope you're enjoying this episode of The Third Chair.
Would you like to be a sponsor for The Third Chair?
We would love to have you join us to keep the show going and also help your business. Send us an email about your product or company and let's talk.
And follow us on social media.
Now back to The Third Chair.
Yes.
Welcome back to The Third Chair with our special guest, John Shepherd. John, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Well, we're wrapping up, and if some of you recognize John, it may be because you saw his picture in the paper, and he was interviewed about a group called Holy Smokes. Can you tell us a little bit about this? It sounds so fascinating.
Well, it is, and it's a fun group, and again, it's unusual, and by its name, it's an ad hoc group of men and women. Some spouses come that have gathered around cigar and pipe smoking. It was started by some ministry leaders here in town. I actually started here in Colorado Springs about 8 or 9 years ago, and is now spread literally around the world. There are Holy Smokes chapters in major cities all over North America and other parts of the world. And it's because of who makes up the group. It's a real eclectic group, primarily ministry leaders and business owners and just general folks now. It's invitation only, but most you know somebody in Holy Smokes, you can get invited.
Yeah, I've been to a meeting. I was impressed with the
it's
community.
Right. It's a no agenda group. It's just guys hang out and relax with a cigar or pipe and talk about exactly what we're doing here today. We do what you guys do. We talk about real life, tell stories. They can be profound. They can be faith-based. They can be, hey, what's our fishing trip like last weekend?
Yeah.
I mean, all of that is included all around something we all share in common and enjoy, just relaxing with a good cigar or a pipe. And so the interview that you're referring to in the Gazette, the actually got wind of it. We have what's called the conclave every year, where holy smokers from other parts of the country come to a central location and have a big weekend gathering.
Oh, wow.
And that was here in Colorado Springs last fall. And
okay.
we're like 150, 200 people up in Monument that met for a
Really?
Saturday
I
and
didn't
Sunday.
realize that. Of course, that was before all the COVID business, I suppose.
Well, actually, it was in the middle of COVID.
Oh,
And again, that's kind of the ethos of Holy Smokes is we do our own thing.
Sure.
And so somebody at the paper got wind of, hey, what is this group? And got a hold of one of the local, we loosely would call them a leader. They're because Holy Smokes groups meet at somebody's backyard or they meet at a
host.
cigar bar. Yeah, a host.
And
so,
maybe a facilitator
yeah,
of sorts.
Yeah. And so there's a few places around town where the group kind of migrates to, and so they were curious, and so the local host said, sure, we'll invite some guys up and you can come and ask about it. So that was the article they did.
Yeah, that's so cool. Now,
it
did you
wasn't
wear?
just a small picture.
Yeah, it was like giant.
Yeah.
No, but they didn't have you in your kilt. Now, what's the story? I've seen several pictures of you online in a Scottish kilt. I don't know if
Right.
that's redundant. Is there an Irish kilt? Or is there,
Well, Scottish and Irish, yes.
yeah, so I guess Scottish. I'm assuming it's Scottish.
In my case, it is.
Yeah, so what's the story of that? How long have you been like wearing a kilt, and what prompted you like to dig out that ancestry and consider doing it?
Well, it really was. It was probably 20 years ago. I got involved in kind of a side hobby of genealogy, ancestry work for my own family for some curiosity reasons at the time, and it's kind of one of those hobbies that once you jump down the rabbit hole, you get you find out how deep it goes.
Are you wearing a dagger in your sock?
But I do. But I did know that my maternal grandmother was born in Scotland, and my grandfather was born in Leeds, England, and I knew that they had connected in Western Canada, and I knew that that was about it when I started the research, and I knew there was a Scottish-English history there, so I wanted to see if I could uncover it, and lo and behold, I found way more than I ever expected to, but including ancestry that I have ancestors that came over with Governor John Winthrop and founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony.
Oh, wow.
And so I have a lot of New England, English, Scottish history there. So it's family heritage for me. I've not yet actually seen the homeland. It's on the bucket list. Maybe someday I'll get to go to Scotland, but that was kind of the prompting of the kilt comes from my maternal grandmother's clan affiliation. Her maiden name was McLean.
Wow.
So we actually, my other claim to fame that I like to drop is Sir Sean Connery and I are members of the same clan.
Oh, wow.
When he was still alive.
Wow.
His grandmother's maiden name was McLean, so he also had a clan affiliation there. So what you see on Facebook is usually it's my full dress McLean black tie kilt set that we were actually, I wore that at our wedding. And so that was kind of a fun thing.
Married in a kilt.
Married in a kilt.
Well, here on the set of our company, 2 Men and a Duck, and here on the third chair, we're thinking about obtaining company kilts and maybe do some interviewing and some kilts, but that'll have to be another episode.
Sure.
In the meantime, we're going to thank you, John, for
absolutely.
being here and sharing your
Thank you, John.
stories, and we're so
thanks.
grateful. And don't forget to like, sub, ring the bell, and share this episode. Thank you very much. We'll see you all next week.
This has been The Third Chair. Next week, our guest will be Rob Decker. Want to be a guest? Want to sponsor our show? Send us an email. Please subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media